Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. This is the Special Needs and Inclusive Education Teachers Network for Middle East and Africa webinar on gifted and talented identification and provision. Today's webinar is presented by Ms. Taruna Khattar, Head of Inclusion for the Ambassador Group of Schools, and Dr. Neha Sharma, Head of Quest Inclusion, an Associate Senior Leader with Dwight School, Dubai, and Qualified Assessor with the British Psychological Society. Taruna is certified in the School Enrichment Model from Renzulli Centre for Creativity and is also trained in visual and kinesthetic learning approaches. Taruna received GES Global Educational Supplies and Solutions Award 2019 for Best Initiatives in Inclusion and Wellbeing, and is known for her passion in supporting students across the ability range. Neha is currently completing her PhD in Gifted Education from the British University in Dubai and was rated by Knowledge and Human Development Authority Dubai 2018 as an exceptional head of inclusion. Neha is also a recipient of the prestigious Professor Indira Parikh Award for Women in Educational Leaders 2018. This presentation will be for about 40 minutes, after which there will be 10 to 20 minutes for questions. We ask you to please post your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to monitor these for discussion at the end. During the presentation, please make sure your microphones are muted to avoid any interference from background noise. Without further ado, let me hand you over to Neha, who's going to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you everyone for attending this session. I want to say that it is so important that we understand how we can identify gifted students and provide for them in the school, because this is an area which I think is totally neglected as of now by the KHDA. So while inclusion has really grown by leaps and bounds in the last decade or so, there's not much focus on giftedness, which is very sad, because these students could actually be the future leaders of tomorrow, driving innovation that we seek for, coming up with sustainable development solutions and so on. So it is such a waste of their talent if we don't challenge them at schools. Without much ado, I'm going to start my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the session. So first thing, I don't know how many of you have heard of the Pygmalion or the Rosenthal effect, which basically research has proven that if we identify students as gifted or highly able, automatically teachers' expectations rise high, and then that leads the students to have more self-belief, and eventually again leads to a raise in their achievement. So this is a cycle which is very healthy, and we want to definitely encourage this in schools. Some basic facts about giftedness. About 2 to 5% of students who are gifted also may have an accompanied or a learning disability along with it. Like we have students who have dyslexia and giftedness, or students who have ADHD and giftedness. So it's very important to understand both, find their strengths and their weaknesses, and cater to the best of our abilities. While there are many adjustments that we can do in the curriculum, including acceleration, curriculum compacting, enrichment, and extension, these are what we need to provide for, but I will come to the more important part of this. How do we do it, basically? Because I think that is something that's presently confusing the educators. Where do we start? How do we start providing for? How do we know what is the appropriate provision for giftedness? And that's what we'll talk about today. So one thing that we need to bear in mind is it is not essential that gifted students will probably have high grades at schools, or that being identified as gifted and talented is a guarantee that they will achieve their grades, whether it is academic or whether they'll be able to show their talent in whatever area of strength there is. It's not a guarantee at all. Giftedness is a part of the student. It's just like when we say learning disability, students have learning disability, it's a part of the character. Similarly, giftedness is a part of the character. Very complex to understand at times. Coming to giftedness again, I would like to say that many of our students who are gifted may be perfectionists, so they would not be satisfied until the tasks are achieve to their level of satisfaction, and sometimes that can be a disadvantage rather than an advantage. So there will be times when we need to tell them it's all right to not be perfect, So this is something I wanted to bring out because it is a struggle for many of my students. I also want to say giftedness may be physical, it may be intellectual, it may be creative, it may be social or perceptual. And we'll go through these. When I was doing my PhD, I must say that there were so many definitions of giftedness and talent. It was really confusing which one do we adapt. And to the extent that different countries probably adopt different definitions. So I thought what was the most beneficial in the educational context and what does the UAE manual tell us? So the UAE KHD and the UAE Ministry of Education have actually adopted the Gavnes model, if you're aware of it. If not, I can always send you a handout to explain. So here what Gavnes says is giftedness is an inborn talent or an exceptional natural ability could be in one or more areas. And talent is that when these students who have the giftedness with the appropriate support are able to convert it into exceptional performance. So let me give you a simple example. Say a child is born with mathematical capabilities that are beyond the normal average that we consider. Fine, the child is mathematically gifted. But if the child gets appropriate support from the school, from his parents, then the child may be able to show that giftedness as mathematical performance. If the child does not receive the support, it may not necessarily show into mathematical performance. So I hope that's clear. So this is Gavnes' model. Very briefly, I've just included one slide. I can send more details if you need. But basically, it shows how the natural abilities could be across different domains, which is the blue box on the slide. So it could be intellectual. It could be in terms of memory, like students could have photographic memory, for example. I'll just give one example of each. Creativity, very difficult to measure. However, I will go through some of the assessments that might help us identify them. Socio-effective, so some students are born leaders or they have amazing social skills. It could be sensory motor, they might excel in sports or maybe any other musical performance, for example. Now, the environmental or the orange box that you see in that slide is where the schools come in. Okay, so this is the environment that the schools can provide, and it is the most important area as an educator for us to focus and see, are we now developing the students' giftedness into performance? So that is the most important. And there are some other factors, but I'm going to skip that and focus on what we can do at school. So one thing that we all need, I think, is we need some standards. For inclusion, luckily, KHDA has provided us with the 2017 inclusion policy. It's followed it up with how to implement it. There are legal connotations that we are not aware of. However, for giftedness, at the moment, UAE does not have any standards prescribed by the Ministry of Education or KHDA. And hence, I have now decided to adopt the NAGC 2019 principles. NAGC stands for the National Association for Gifted Child, and these standards come from the US. Very little adaptation is required to make it suitable for the UAE environment. The basic principles that NAGC relies on is that learners are defined as having as gifts and talents rather than saying gifted. And we understand that giftedness is a dynamic concept. So if a child is identified as gifted, it is not essential that the child is lifelong identified as gifted. It's a dynamic concept. If the child receives appropriate support, and there might be so many other factors other than support that might help a child progress as continue to being gifted on the register. But sadly, there are situations where the giftedness doesn't, it's not consistent, and then you have to drop a child or exit a child from the gifted register. So as educators, we need to understand that giftedness is a dynamic concept, and this is the first thing I introduce to my students, my parents, and my teachers. Identification procedures should be equitable to include learners from diverse backgrounds, irrespective of their backgrounds. It should only be based on their abilities. The gifted education standards need to focus on student outcomes. If I have put a zillion programs in place, but if it is not showing as an improvement in the student outcomes, what's the point of having so many programs? So the gifted education standards always focus on student outcomes, okay? Just being able to gauge the effectiveness of the program or the provisions that we're putting in place. Gifted provisions is a responsibility of all educators, just like any inclusion that we expect. It is not the gifted coordinator who can alone make the big change in the school. It is the whole ethos of the school where every educator takes responsibility for challenging and having high expectations of our gifted learners. That change, that awareness is going to bring about the change. And gifted services should be available to learners across all learning environment. It should be correlated to what are their areas of interest, what are their needs, and what are their abilities. So the gifted standards, NADC standards, are across 6 different categories, which are learning and development, assessment, curriculum, learning environment, programming, and professional development. Now, while it is easy for me to send links and you can download all of those standards, I thought what would help you is if I give a practical example of how I have used these standards at my school. So I'm new at Dwight. It's just 6 months since I'm at Dwight. I started identifying gifted students based on certain criteria, which I will explain. And I'm using the NADC standards to see where I am at the minute and how I can progress and how as a school we can progress. So this is a presentation I have actually given to my parents, and I'm going to share that with you because I have permission from my school to do so. The first programming standard, which is learning and development. So I have selected only 1 or 2 of the outcomes that I can actually say that I have put in place right now. So I've selected the outcomes of self-understanding and awareness of needs. And if you read the student outcomes, it is educators engage students with gifts and talents in identifying their areas of interest. And also the learning opportunities matches these. So let me go through how I have achieved this. If you see these forms, which are primary interstellizer and secondary interstellizer, this is again based on the Renzulli model that Taruna will cover much more in detail later. But these forms are essential for gathering in-depth information about what are the students' interests, what would they like to do at school, and so on. And when you analyze these forms, it actually gives you so much information about each student. So I have actually had my students complete these forms. They are still in process, but the upper school is managed, the lower school is still going on. And when I received these forms based on their areas of interest, I was able to split them into smaller groups. And then accordingly, if I had a group of students interested in design, I spoke to my design teachers and came up with what kind of project or how can we cater to their needs. When I had a group of students mathematically gifted, I sat down with my head of math head of department, and then we came up with an enrichment for them from the math head of department, okay? Similarly, science, English, and so on, even sports, I have my head of innovation who's providing coding opportunities for students who are good at coding. So this is how I have satisfied some of the student outcomes of standard 1. Going to standard 2, which is assessment, which again, at the minute, I'm only able to say that identification is what I'm catering to now. And I'll go through, you can read the indicators. It basically says how we assess students based on standardized assessments. Step 1, have qualitative and quantitative information. Step 2, and step 3, inform the parents or the guardians about the identification process. And these 3 I have already achieved till now. So all schools in UAE are mandated to use the CAT4. And that for me is the first step for identifying students who might be gifted and talented. I'm not saying CAT4 is the only assessment, but it forms step 1 because this for sure all schools have information. You must be aware that CAT4 has 4 batteries, which is verbal reasoning, quantitative, spatial, and non-verbal. So students who are verbally gifted would probably be my students who would be gifted in English language or literacy, not just English language, I would say literacy. Students who are quantitatively inclined would be my mathematically gifted students, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to go through the criteria with you. Alongside having criteria, one of the slides that my teachers found extremely useful, and so I'm sharing with you, is that you can see that there are verbal sternites and spatial sternites. So when you have the CAT4 data of your students, you can actually place the students on this slide, and you have ready-made instructions or strategies that you can use to cater to their needs. So this was what my classroom teachers are doing. They're actually printing this out on an A3 size paper, laminating it, and putting their students' names in the right place. So they automatically see which students would benefit, for example, with mind maps, with videos, and so on. So it is very, very handy, and I highly encourage using this slide. That's the reason I included this for your benefit. So in my school, the way we identify is, the first is using the CAT4, like I said, the first step. And when students are stenine 7 and 8, they would be on the highly able register. This, of course, is seen in conjunction with any kind of summative assessments that you have. So in my school, we use the MAP assessments. So I would use that in conjunction with the CAT4. The CAT4 is the main, okay? The MAP will only show if the student is achieving in line or no. Coming to gifted and talented, if the student is in stenine 9 in any one battery, or if they have stenine 8 in 2 or more batteries, then that would form my baseline for identifying them as gifted and talented. Step 2 would be gathering qualitative data from teachers. So I send this CAT4 data to the teachers and I get their feedback. Do you think the students are gifted? And of course, it's not just yes or no, but there's a detailed feedback, followed by the gifted and evaluation scales. I'm happy to share the GATES assessment with you, as well as the evaluation, so to help you see. And this evaluation actually helps us see if the student is strong in intellectual capabilities, is strong academically, that means it's hardworking and has very good work ethics. Is the student artistically inclined? Is the student creative? And does the student have strong leadership skills? So it helps you again identify their areas of strength. And that is how I develop my gifted and talented or highly able registers. But this is just the start. Throughout the year, teachers and parents and students can refer if they feel that a student merits to be in the gifted and talented on the register. And of course, they would again have to use this rating itself. Sometimes students also do peer referrals or refer themselves. So that's a healthy habit to encourage as far as we have some consistent criteria to see how they enter the register. Coming to the NADC Standard 3, which is Curriculum, Instruction and Planning. So since I'm just 6 weeks into the school year, the academic year, I can just vouch for the curriculum planning. So educators, for example, know how to integrate technologies for building up student knowledge and how to solve problems and communicate or express creatively and collaborate. This is the only outcome that I found the list of outcomes that I can say we have started working on. I'm not saying we've achieved it, but we've started working on. But having the standards helps us see where we are now and what we need to plan for as a next step. So as one example that I could give was, I had a group of students who were brilliant at not just coding, but they wanted to have a design-based coding environment. So we got an external agency called VR Academy who provided virtual reality-based learning environment, and they actually have a learning curriculum that goes on for 1.5 years. So it's not just coding, but it's something, it has a proper learning curriculum. So I highly promoted that at my school, and some of my students have joined this. Coming to Programming Standard 4, that's learning environment. I think the first step that we need to do is establish the trust and support and the collaborative action amongst the learners and teachers. We need to respect each other at any point in time. They need to feel comfortable to come and speak to you about whatever is going on in their mind. So establishing relations with students, I think, is the first and foremost and probably the most successful strategy that you can develop. Encourage leadership. We have so many leadership opportunities for students at school. So encourage leadership, but don't force them. Encourage leadership if they have those traits in them. Ensure using technology. Kids nowadays are far more advanced than us. At least I definitely don't seem to match up with their capabilities. So that's something that they can do. And hence, sometimes it's also okay to get external providers if we can't provide for all the opportunities within the school. So we have enrichment in my school. We have different ways of catering to needs like leadership opportunities, collaboration. There are other external competitions and school trips, use of technology, and counseling. So we need to be very aware that many of the gifted students have very high emotional quotient, and it's very important to cater to their social emotional needs alongside others. Programming standard 5, standard 5 is programming. And again, here I would say we are currently planning for enrichment opportunities. We haven't have all opportunities in place, but we are planning. Like I said, I'm speaking to different heads of department so that everybody plans this along with sports, along with music, along with coding. Make it as comprehensive as possible. There are some students of mine who've expressed an interest in culinary arts. So over time, I'm going to try and find if I can cater to that, to that need as well. So just have to be so open-minded and try and find resources in your community. Sometimes within your parent body itself, you can find amazing resources. So be open-minded and search and see how we can cater to best to their needs. Also a school policy. First step, please develop a gifted and talented policy. Very important to have that. If my school allows, I'm happy to share an example of what we have done at my school, but I will seek first permission from my school. Okay. So high quality teaching is where the classroom, homeroom, or the subject teachers cater to their needs. During induction week, I have also trained my staff of what that high quality teaching looks like. Okay. We have learner profiles. We are developing learner profiles still because we are gathering a lot of information. We will eventually develop the advanced learning plans, which is the equivalent of IEPs for gifted students. We have put enrichment opportunities in place and we are still developing it. And of course, the policy is very much in place. It's shared with the parents and students. The last is programming standard 6, which is professional development. So my PhD is in gifted education, which has really helped me immensely understand the NHC standards and promote, and that's why I'm promoting those standards here through this forum as well. All my teachers also have access to these, and I have shared the exact presentation with them that I'm sharing with you. So we are all on this journey, in this journey together. I encourage teachers to get professionally developed. So if I know of any professional courses, either free or paid, I do pass the information to my teachers, and then it's up to them to then develop themselves. Also, students, I always encourage them to advocate for their rights. One last takeaway from me is please focus on the emotional needs of students with gifts and talents. Don't always target them for like participating in all the competitions because you're gifted. You need to perform well because you're gifted, because then it stresses them out. And then they might actually feel negative about their labels, which is not the intention at all. And also encourage hard work. Hard work beats talent, definitely, if talent doesn't work hard. So that's most important takeaway again. Thank you so much. I'm now going to hand over to Taruna for her presentation on enrichment.
Thank you, Neha, for the wonderful presentation. And I think I'm going to take it ahead from there in terms of identification, as you have already focused on that. What is important for us, all of us, the child is the center. I'm going to focus on school enrichment model, which is from Renzulli Center. So the first thing which we are looking at is 3 E's, which is enjoyment, engagement, and enthusiasm. Which, because whenever we are talking about the students, if we are having all the 3 E's in place, we can see the higher achievement scores. So the students who are, even if in case they are not able to score, and most of us, we feel that in the class, they're quite, we feel that the child has a spark, but the child is not performing. But if in case any of these 3 E's are not there, the child will not be able to reach this part of higher achievement scores. But if in case we have these 3 E's in place, I'm sure we all will agree that the child will be able to move ahead in not only in this course but in other areas of development as well. So this is something which why we need these enrichments. As Ms. Neha has already told, that it is important for us to understand what are their strengths, what are their creativities. So it motivates the students in the creative and productive ways, and they come up with different ideas. Their involvement is more when we are creating these enrichments. And it is very important for us to understand, firstly, because most of us always believe that enrichment is only for gifted children. It's not like that. Enrichment is for all the learners. Specifically, when I talk about type 1 and type 2, these are the enrichments which are for most of them. In type 1 is almost for all the students. So that's how we come to know that who is in, because sometimes we miss out on, what is there for the child in the class. Sometimes they may not enjoy the class because it's of no interest to them. So if you are putting something which is of their interest, they will start working well. Specifically, if in case I talk with 2E students, exceptionally kid students, you will see that something which is of their interest, specifically, they will start performing better. So that's how we start figuring out, okay, this is the student who has this creative side as well, and they are able to perform better. Their involvement in the classrooms would be higher. Why we need enrichment again, as we say that it's like training is important for them, and the training has to be like in creative thinking, the problem solving, all the topics whatever is there in their curriculum. It's not only that, it has to be also something which is outside the curriculum. At times you might have to pick up, which will help them to develop on their creative thinking and problem solving skills. And it has to be specifically when we talk about type 2 enrichments, they are something where you are giving them chance to think and feel processes. What is thinking and feeling? Thinking and feeling is something where the child has been given real life scenarios where the child is able to think and feel how they are going to when they are in the real world, how they are going to feel. So the enrichments are important to give them understanding of the real life scenarios. The learning opportunities which are important, which again comes from enrichment, because when you are giving them more learning opportunities and different things in different assignments, through different assignments and projects or research work, they start developing on their learning skills independently, and they start moving on, and they learn how to progress in their own assignments and research without much of the help. They start working socially and emotionally, as Ms. Neha already told, that it's very important for us to look in. We are providing all these trainings, automatically we will start understanding that their social and emotional development is also progressing. Because most of them are observed to be, they lack in interpersonal skills at times, and social skills are always a challenge for them. They can feel that sometimes they are left out or they are not being understood. So when they are trying to meet all these expectations, if their other skills are catered and they understand the real life scenarios, they will start working on their social. It will also help them to move in to social and emotional areas also. Now, thanks, Ms. Neha, for pointing out that gifted is a behavior, because this is something which we all need to learn. If we are focusing on that gifted as a behavior, it's not only the above average abilities we are talking about, it's the creativity also from these students. So if in case we are seeing gifted behavior is not only in above average students, it could be seen in the students with the determination also at times. And specifically when we talk about children on spectrum, you might find a lot of children who are high functional. They could be gifted, they may show gifted behavior in one or the other areas most of the time. Now, how the school enrichment model looks like, it is the regular curriculum is something which needs to be looked at, because it is something, the enrichment topics which we are going to pick up could be from the regular curriculum or from outside the curriculum also, but the curriculum has to be looked into. Then we are looking into the enrichment clusters, because I'll be going ahead with the enrichment clusters and enrichment triad model, which is the main focus for today's session. The continuum of special services, which could be, involved in a lot of project-based. Now, enrichment learning and teaching, as I told, type 1 and type 2 enrichment is for all. Type 1 is for all the students. Type 3 is for, students who are advanced or highly able students, I would say. Type 2 is for someone who is moving from type 1 to type 2. They may be highly able, and from type 1 and type 2, we might see that a lot of students may not be in type 3, but few will definitely move to type 3. Now, what is type 1? Type 1 is basically, it is exposed to a variety of experiences. Like, it may not be always that the students in type 1, as I told, it has to be given to all the students. So there are a variety of videos shown. Field trips could be part of it, could be, sessions by different professionals from different fields. So, and type 2 could be nurturing and developing on the same. As I told earlier, thinking and feeling processes needs to be developed for them. So how and what those people who have been called, if in case, I'll give you an example, an author who is coming to coming to school for addressing for literature or literacy thing, it will be for all the students, but very few will go and try to show their interest and understand more about their writing skills when they are coming to type. Those are the students who would be coming to type 2, because they are going to be developing on that thinking and feeling processes, that how is it going to look like, how the writer is going to write, how the writer, what are the strategies being used by this writer to come at this position. So thinking and feeling processes mean that they are being nurtured on that development area, that what and how they are going to achieve what they're interested in. Type 3 is again students who are really keen to get in-depth knowledge and are concerned about real life scenarios, real life problems. They are more inquisitive about where they and how they are going to enhance their knowledge based on their areas of interest. So type 3 is typically advanced or high end, whom we call it as under total gifted areas, like where they are totally advanced or highly able students. Now, as I told, general exploratory activities are the part of type 1 enrichments. Type 2 would be an added interest in address topics. So if in case whosoever is interested will show inclination to what that particular field. So there could be smaller group, but advanced level opportunities are for highly able or highly motivated students who are under type 3 enrichments. Now, what are the kind of activities we normally do? I'm sure we all are doing all these type 1 activities are always part of our curriculum also, where field trips and showing the videos, online activities, because these are certain things which all the schools, I believe, had been doing and they are focusing on. And as Ms. Neha has already told, that questioning skills of the teacher is a very important part of these getting them to the next level. So if you are seeing type 1 exposure activities, there are some things which we are already doing it. But if we are observing them, because some of the, I could see some of the questions coming up in the chat box regarding the identification. So if you are going to expose them for type 1 activity, how much interest the particular child is showing in this particular area, is it consistent or not? So those feedbacks are really important, and teachers are required to observe and note down each and every aspect of it, because that really takes the child to the next level and give them the type 2 enrichment, where we are going to work on their creative training or critical thinking, research skills, because research skills are something, again, I understand research skills are important and we are focusing on, but if you see a lot of children, who are highly able, there one part which is always a challenge, they have lots to explore, but sometimes they get lost into that. They don't know what to research for, or what are the kind of sources they should be looking for, and authenticity of the things. So under type 2, when we are talking about, it is very important to address those areas as well, because so that is something which we call it as metacognitive skills, which I'm going to take it ahead. So these are the things, training activities which you can focus on: research skills, projects, and independent studies. So from type 2, we are moving on to individual and groups investigations, where it is totally based on real life scenarios, and students are given exposure through research skills or to projects and independent studies, interest-based investigations, or competitions across. Now, moving ahead, when we are talking about type 1 enrichment, it is based on regular topics, curricular topics, or standing alone topics in which students will have their own, will have interest. So child who has really keen interest, they will really enjoy and move ahead and may score high in that particular area. And if in case they're really interested to know more about it, they will be moving on to type 2 enrichment. Now, just to give you an example of type 1 enrichment, like as I told, it's based on curricular topics or any standalone topics. Firstly, they will be given activities to interest. The level of the interest is very important, because till the time we know where the child is interested, we will not understand that how to plan the activity. Now, here, when we are talking about the debriefing questions, it's very important during this time to have the questions like, what did you like into the, because these questions will lead or will tell us that how the child is showing interest, or is the child moving on to the next level of enrichment. The questions could be related to, what is the part of the, what is there in this presentation which the child liked the most? Is it something the child looking like, did the child get any idea, or is there any thing which the child can relate from real life scenario, or he or she has thought about any career opportunities ahead? So certain questions are important for from the teacher's side to understand the child's interest, how much the child is willing to take this to the next level, and based on those responses, we move to type 2. So if you're seeing the type 2 enrichment in this model, students are basically exposed to the new ideas, topics, and provide them opportunities to explore various interests, learn new things that are, extensions of their regular curriculum, or things that they never know. And also they provide them the training in learning advanced methodologies in these areas of interest. There are basically, I've mentioned 5 skills, but there is something which is called metacognitive skills, which is more related to technology, where students learn to understand what's real or unreal on the internet, or that is viable, or how to look for the sources or its authenticity. This is important part for students nowadays to understand, because specifically when they are moving ahead with research skills and developing on the projects independently. Now, enrichment clusters. Enrichment clusters, why it is important? They are also again based on the triad model, and are mainly focused on type 1 and type 2 triad model, so that they get exposed to new ideas and activities. And in some of these clusters, students move to type 3. Ideally, 12 to 13 weeks are is the period for each cluster we advise. But if in case we don't have that much time, so 8 to 10 weeks is, you can provide them with the, smaller assignments or projects. It should not be only projects, but it could also be some services. Now, we must be thinking that at why enrichment clusters are important, but it is very important because it gives the opportunity for all the learners, not only to students, but also to the teachers. Because most of us, when we are thinking, a lot of time, you will realize that we got into this profession because of our passion. We enjoy doing some certain things, but because of our regular work, a lot of things we put it aside, because we are always into the process of our lesson plans and other things. So we don't get that flexibility to work with kids. We don't enjoy at times, but we are in the monotonous life of working on our lesson plans and performing or finishing the syllabus and everything. But here it gives opportunities not only to the students, but also to the teachers to work with flexibility and fun according to the interest, not only students' interest. Here I would say the interest of the teachers is also very important, because if in case teacher, it is not necessary in the enrichment clusters that it has to be the teacher who is teaching math only has to take math cluster, but it is important for the teacher to have certain interests. It could be, as Ms. Neha just shared her example of how they have enrichment clusters in their school is on your coding and art, music and all. So similarly, we have enrichment clusters where it is not based on only I would say curriculum wise, but it is topic wise. Here we have clusters like clubs where interdisciplinary things have been taken into consideration, because it's again very important. A lot of times you will see that a child who has spatial ability or a child who has verbal skill may be good in other areas also, but because they are not required to present it in the form what they are good at, they are not able to perform or they are not able to take this ahead. So at times working in the enrichment clusters, and when we are giving them the flexibility to work, they start showing a lot of interest in their creativity part in those during those clusters. Now, what are the major features of enrichment clusters? As theme of this should be that every student, because we really believe that every student is special, and we create these conditions so that every child becomes a specialist in a group. It's not that a child who's really highly able should be only the specialist. In fact, we have our clusters where children with learning disability or spectrum, they are exceptionally good and talented, or they are showing exceptionally what I would say, they are gifted in the areas like yoga and all. So they had been given that kind of exposure, and these kind of children, they have actually made world records recently. I'm not so this is well developed cluster, and through yoga they are learning other areas also. It's like, I would say, math, or what you call it as math and science, something which really connects them, and they are able to learn through yoga. So what are the major features of enrichment clusters? Now, the golden rule for all the enrichment cluster is that nothing is to be done according to, it's not that, okay, you are just giving something to the child and the child has the flexibility. Yes, but they all are directed towards a product or services. Something has to be there when they are working to whichever area, some direction has to be given. So it's not that where we are giving them the task assigned, but at the same time, we see that the products or some services are the results, of, these enrichment clusters. Now, teachers and students, as I told, they choose the clusters according to their own interests. So they are expected to participate equally. They are involved. It's not that the child who is, participating is only working independently or individually. It's not like that. The teachers are equally involved, the students are equally involved. And when we talk about grouping of the students, these we have to ensure that these none of them are working separately, and all of them should not be working towards the same thing. If in case, I'll give you an example where a child who is creating a magazine. Now, there could be few who are really good in writing. There could be few who would be good in art. There could be few who are good in designing part of it, or code, like I would say Photoshop and all that stuff. So students need to be grouped across grade levels, and they have to be according to interests and strengths. Now, it is, if in case grade, I would say KG to grade 2 ideally would be together, or maybe from 3 to 6 or 8 can be together. So it has to be across grade level. It cannot be, same grades together, because the focus for us is advanced learning. So they should be able to learn from each other and work towards one product or service which they are focusing on. There is, the best part is we don't have to be ready with our lesson plans. That's something for the teachers to look at. So there should not be any predetermined lesson plans. The flexibility has to be, we have to go with the flow, and it is not something where we have planned something and we are taking the lesson towards that side only. It has to be according to the child's interest and according to what products or services they're going. Because a lot of times we will see that when they're working, a lot of questions are coming into their mind. So questioning is very important during these sessions. And how the teacher is involved is through the questioning and giving them the resources. Now, authentic methods, we, as I told that, we need to break these groups according to their learning styles or product styles also at times, or content. So, like, it should be divided in such a way that all should not be doing same things. Now, authentic methods of professional investigators are used to pursue these products or services. So it's very important for these learners or these, students to understand what are the authentic methods. If in case they are working on certain things like, as I told, a writing, I give you example of a writer. So for a person who is pursuing something in as a writer, should know what are the skills required by writers. So it is very important for them to understand the actual method. They should be exposed to those methods through those professional investigators through the talks and first few sessions in these enrichment clusters. We need to focus on these areas. A lot of videos needs to be shown, a lot of field visits, a lot of whatever you call it as, in terms of speakers from outside, or maybe certain things which can give them more experience of understanding what are the different methods being used by these professionals to work on their things. Now, special time blocks needs to be assigned. It should not be always that, okay, during the classroom learning, we can do these enrichments. No, we need to have at least 1.5 hours for these enrichment clusters. Because when we start working, it's the interest we are working on for the students. And these students start working and they get so much engrossed, and that's how their creativity comes on. Now, we need to have, maybe you can have one of the stay back days, because we normally do it during our stay back days. So I can think of, okay, those stay back days can be assigned for these enrichment clusters. Now, the rules for regular schools which are there cannot be applied here, because we need to give them flexibility to explore, to come up with their own creativity and find out their own resources. Lot of resources or task cards, all these things needs to be provided, and these things can be in the interest corners or in interest corners, what we call it as, where children can be provided with a number of resources, and the students can pick up the resources according to their own interest, and teachers can start interviewing them during these times. As I told initially, the teachers need to work on building up on what is their strength by interviewing and understanding them better, and what are their learning styles. As Neha told, it's very important for the learner's profile to be understood, especially before we start with enrichment clusters. So few things which we should not be doing during in these clusters should be developing the lesson plans or predetermined expectations, teacher's talk. And most of the time, if you see during inspection time, we are hearing these things from the inspectors, too much teacher talk. We did not see the child being challenged in the class. So if we are following all these things, I'm sure you will understand that enrichments are easy to go ahead with. It's not going to be difficult, but if we are following all these things, not to let all the students do the same thing and expect the traditional classroom, like a quiet classroom kind of thing. Now, 6 key questions which are important that we need to, have these students with this, people with an interest in that area. It's very important. If in case the child who is not interested to do something in spatial or something related to project, but we are giving him project, whereas the child is more focused on research based only, may not, take the child ahead. The child may not be able to perform. As Neha just now told that leadership roles or leadership skills, the child may not be really good at or may not be interested to move ahead with towards that. We should not be pushing the child towards it. Now, products or services they create or provide, it's very important because it has to be something related to real life scenarios. So the students should be given certain, situations where they should be able to figure out what are the real life problems, because it helps them or motivates them to move ahead, and what kind of resources and materials are used during taking them ahead. It will really help them if they are able to uh, take up according to their interest. How and with whom do they communicate the results of their work? That is very important, because again, who are the people? Normally we have seen that we give them exposure through our through competitions inside the school or outside the school, but if in case we give them chance of performing in front of real life, in real life scenarios, like if in case we have something like uh, TEDx, or maybe something, a speaker who's really good at given opportunity to perform or on stage or in during TEDx and all, they may perform or they get much more motivated. In fact, I'll share with you one history, like where a child, he was watching a television, and suddenly one of one day he was watching the television and he saw a child with progeria who had fatal congenital disease. He had, he wanted to ride on roller coaster, but because of his um, challenges, he could not. Now, seeing this child who could not take up this ride, this child who was watching this television show really got interested towards it and started thinking on those lines that I really need to work on something where these children can be given opportunity to sit on the or take a ride on roller coaster. So here when he started working on it, he started the type 1 enrichment out here was showing the television show. So type 2 part was he started understanding for few weeks, he started working on how to design the roller coaster, how to design or planning and organizing what are the things which are required, how the roller coaster works. So all those things he started learning. How, in fact, he went to the roller coaster rides himself to see. He started doing video shoots, how the roller coaster is coming down, what are the areas. He started interviewing a lot of people. So all that over a period of time, after a few weeks, in fact, it took almost 1.5 years for that child to come up with the prototype for that. And he could come up with the chair, because in this process of type 2 enrichment, I would say he was also having a vibration chair for himself to understand how does it feel, what are the kind of, feeling. So that is what thinking and feeling is. So while he was thinking and he started experiencing himself, what are the challenges, what are the things which he needs to look at. So those things took him to the third part of it, which is the prototype. And that is your advanced learning. That is your type 3 enrichment. And when it came out, it was a big success, because though that child with progeria was not there, but that could be used by other students who were with the physical ailments or physical impairment. So that was the kind of enrichment which is required in our schools as well. So as I told, for type 3 enrichment clusters, its basic skills are important, but advanced content and processing skills are more important. They need to develop on their products and services. They need to, especially when students are interested in pursuing something, they need to commit their time which is required for advanced content acquisition, and they need to have some training in which they assume that where they can inquire, they can learn, and they can develop authentic products, which is important. So acquiring content and processes that are used within particular disciplines or their areas of expression. And as I told, interdisciplinary studies are always better in these things, because even though the child who was working on thing like prototype for this progeria thing, so a lot of things were used, not only his creativity part, it was also his mathematical skills or science skills. Everything was being utilized for him. Now, what makes a problem real, as I told, it's very important for us to understand that these students should be given real life problems to work on. So the personalization of interest, authentic methodology, and no, there should not be any existing solution or right answer for them, so that they can explore, they can come up with their own solutions, they can come up with their own designs and create an impact on the audience other than in addition to a teacher. So finally, if in case we look at, it's type 3 enrichment, which is based on building interest around the child is the center, building up by interviewing the students on different problems and developing the management plan. So as Neha told, that it's not something like an inclusion, it is also something which has to be in the ethos of the school. So the management plan has to be there to assist this child, building what you call it as thinking about the resources and methodologies with the assistance from the management, and finding them an appropriate platform or audience, which is...
Taruna, thank you so much. Can I interrupt you now?
Yeah, I think we are done. This is the last.
You've done an amazing presentation, and we have just 1 minute left, and we want to respect the time boundaries. Yes. So I just want, before I thank you, we had several people posting questions in the chat during that presentation. Sana, Manal, Shadra, and Anne-Marie. And thank you. Neha and Jeanette both posted responses. So hopefully people were following that chat and could see the responses to the questions. Amal also shared a link to the First World Giftedness Centre International Conference, and hopefully anyone participating took hold of that link if they want to have a look at that more closely. So thank you so much to Taruna and Neha for preparing this webinar on gifted and talented identification and provision. And thank you to everyone who joined us today and shared your questions. We do hope you can join future webinar presentations and question and answer sessions with the chairs of Special Needs and Inclusive Education Teachers Network, Middle East and Africa. This group is supported by the Lexicon Reading Centre, Dubai. Thank you.